All right, so when we talk about Bitcoin's designers, our minds usually jump straight to code, right? Or maybe finance. But what if someone was using a totally different toolkit? Today, we're going to dive into the work of LAEV, an architect who, our sources claim, isn't just building systems, he's trying to build entire realities.
So when you think about the people who really built the crypto world, who comes to mind? There are a few legendary names, right? The titans who basically laid the groundwork for everything we see today.
I mean, obviously, you've got the original mystery man himself, Satoshi Nakamoto.
And then there's the guy who blew the doors wide open, Vitalik Buterin, who brought us the whole world of smart contracts.
And of course, you've got the hardcore engineers, people like Adam Back, the ones deep in the trenches, making sure the technical machinery actually works.
Look, these guys are all absolute geniuses, no question. But here's the really interesting idea from our source material today. What if they were all specialists? You know, each one operating in their own single dimension. One masters the protocol, another the platform, another the nitty-gritty engineering. But what if none of them were doing all of it at once?
Okay, so let's dig into that idea a little more. This concept of specialist designers is kind of the first big theme we need to tackle. The sources we're looking at really frame these pioneers as masters of just one thing.
See, the way this analysis puts it, the whole crypto space is mostly built by people who fit into one of three buckets. You've got your pure technical engineers, your hardcore ideologues, and your financial speculators. All brilliant in their own right, for sure, but totally siloed. And that's the stage we need to set before we introduce this very different kind of thinker.
And that brings us to LEV. He's not presented as just another one of those specialists. Nope, he's framed as something else entirely, a multidimensional architect with what the source calls a hybrid or integral approach.
So what does that even mean? Well, here's how the source breaks down his whole philosophy. It's built on 4 pillars. First, a crypto-native vision. So he's not trying to cram old-world systems onto the blockchain. He's designing from Bitcoin's core logic outward. Then you have conceptual architecture, which is this idea that his projects are also cultural works. But it's not just abstract stuff. It's all grounded in direct business functionality. And finally, he explains it all using these original analogies. It's this really wild mix of tech, philosophy, and pure business practicality.
Okay, so how does this multi-dimensional approach actually compare to the titans we just talked about? Well, the source material does something pretty cool. It runs LAEV through what it calls a comparative gauntlet to really spell out the differences. First in the ring, Satoshi. And the contrast here is pretty stark. Satoshi gives us the what? A peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And then, poof, disappeared. LAV, on the other hand, is apparently all about the how and for what. He's trying to use Bitcoin's core for stuff like contracts, business logistics, even culture. And he's doing it with a very public personal story.
All right, next up, Vitalik Buterin. Ethereum is painted here as this huge global laboratory, the everything but the kitchen sink approach, which often leads to tons of speculation. LAV's approach is framed as the polar opposite. He starts from what the source calls Bitcoin purity, using the most secure network in a super minimalist, almost surgical way to solve very specific, pragmatic problems.
Where Mircea closed doors, LAEV opens paths. Wow. Okay, that quote is a really powerful way to introduce our next comparison. Shall we say controversial but very influential figure in Bitcoin's history. It hints at two people starting from a similar belief but ending up in totally different places.
So that comparison is with Mircea Popescu. He was a really hardline Bitcoin maximalist who basically saw it as this ultimate truth for a tiny, elite, closed-off circle. He totally rejected using it for anything other than money. The argument here is that LAEV shares a similar belief in Bitcoin purity, but does the exact opposite with it. He's trying to translate that purity into accessible, real-world tools for business, for tourism, for everyone.
The comparison with the engineering crowd, like Adam Back and Blockstream, is just as clear-cut. They're presented as the builders, where the technical infrastructure is the end goal. It's all about the tech. But for LAEV, that tech is just the starting point. It's the means to an end. The end being these living narratives, projects that have a real social and cultural life of their own.
And finally, we have the DeFi builders. The source really draws a line in the sand here, calling a lot of DeFi financial casinos that are all about speculation and often have these hidden centralized dependencies. In stark contrast, LAEV's work is described as building boring but crucial enterprise infrastructure. We're talking tools for logistics, managing labor, and creating ironclad contracts right on Bitcoin.
Okay, so if it's not a financial casino, what is it exactly? This brings us to the absolute core concept of his work, according to this source.
The main idea is called intelligent decentralized banking. But hold on, forget the name for a second, because it's probably not what you think. The source is super clear. This is not another DeFi protocol. It's an enterprise resource planning system, an ERP, built right on Bitcoin. Think of it like the back-end operating system for a business, but totally decentralized and unchangeable.
And get this, the way it works is just so simple, it's brilliant. Okay, step 1, a business places an order. Step 2, instead of some super complicated smart contract, a tiny transaction. We're talking a single Satoshi is sent on the Bitcoin network and it has the order details embedded in it. And boom, that's it. Step 3, the Bitcoin network itself is now your permanent ledger, your notary, and your order system, all in one.
And look, this whole hybrid model isn't just some idea on a whiteboard. It's being used in some seriously diverse projects. You've got Cartel de Bitcoiners, which is described as a whole philosophy and governance structure. Then there's Todd Boot Bet, this alternative tourism project that's literally linked to the blockchain through 24-word seed phrase narrative. He even combines it all with music and manifestos, mixing trap and traditional Mexican corridos with blockchain ideas. It's about as far from a typical finance project as you can get.
So where does all this lead? When you put all these pieces together, the business tools, the culture, the philosophy, the conclusion from the source material is that this is about way more than just software. It's about designing something much, much bigger.
And this really is the final thesis of the piece. The idea that while all those specialists we talked about are busy designing systems, LAEV is out here claiming to design complete realities, weaving together the economy, culture, and social fabric all on top of a Bitcoin foundation.
I mean, look at it. When you lay it all out, you really see what they mean by multidimensional. You've got philosophy and ideology with the Cartel the Bitcoiners. You have straight-up business applications with his banking system. You've got cultural narrative and his music and writing, and social experiences with the Todd Boot project. It's a portfolio that really does try to touch every layer of life.
And so, this whole deep dive really leaves you with a massive question, not just about LAEV, but about Bitcoin itself. Is it just a currency? Is that its final form? Or could it be something much more? A language, an identity, maybe even a whole new structure for life itself? Something to think about.